Story 1. You have many people in the comments giving you good advice, but you are taking a negative approach to it. Would you also like a realistic view and advice on home owning from someone in a similar position? Or is this just a complaint? Story 2. I am an older person who has seen the world and our economy change several times in my life. The way it is now is not the way it will always be, based on past experience. Owning a home may not be realistic right now, and the way everything is going makes it seem like it will never happen. But think about this. Keep living your life, save everything you can, work hard to earn some extra money that you can save, live frugally, keep putting your small change away, and wait until life as we know it makes a big change. I was attending a private, expensive, faith-based college in 1978 and 1979. I saw that big recession hit, and everything changed drastically. I knew a girl on campus who could only work part-time to keep up with her classes and had to have a car to get to work. With her family's help, she ended up buying a used car at 18% interest. I was working and thinking about retirement in the near future when the recession hit in 2008 and 2009. For some people, that was a terrible time for many reasons. Our country, the United States, has recovered from both of those recessions in my lifetime, as well as the Great Depression before that. Another thing in life I have learned is that you generally reach the goals you set. The goal you have right now may feel discouraging. Instead of saying you will never own a house, say that owning a house is in the future but not right now. Then keep working toward that. Save what you can and pay extra on the bills that you can pay off. Ways to increase your income include getting a job that pays more, getting another job on the side, or moving to another area with more opportunities or a lower cost of living. Sometimes that means working a job you dislike because it pays well and has good benefits like a factory job. Or switch over to the trades mechanic, plumbing, electrical, welding, construction, and learn to do the job well enough to go out on your own one day. I do not mean to sound like the typical older person who tells everybody to work harder and get off my lawn. I know times are tough right now. I lived through tough times too. I worked blue-collar jobs all my life, many of which I never really liked. I ended up working in a Toyota factory that had good pay and benefits, which made my life better, but I hated going there every single day. I know housing costs are very high right now. I know that student loans are a heavy burden. I know that groceries are expensive. I know wages are not keeping up. I understand the competition in the job market, but you have to figure out how you are going to overcome some of that. Not all of it, but there are parts of those challenges that you can manage better than others. Set a positive goal. It is not a failure if you do not reach it, but if you set it low, you will reach it every time. Take a breath, then move forward. Story 3. Don't worry. Once you realize that big dreams like that are unobtainable, focus on smaller ones. I lived in a poor apartment after my divorce and was very down. I moved 2 years ago to a much nicer one with a balcony and peace and quiet. Of course, I will have to move again in a few years with a roommate to survive the rising costs for the last 20 years of my life. But still, enjoy the smaller victories while you can. Story 4. If you are in a big city, it is worth recalling that home ownership was not a common objective until the latter 20th century. Most residents of New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago throughout history were lifelong renters because that made more financial sense in large, dense cities with very high real estate costs. Instead of owning a house, people invested their wealth in savings accounts, bonds, and other financial instruments. Before the rise of the internet, such wealth management was mostly inaccessible to those outside major cities. People outside these areas invested in houses because that was the most affordable option available to them. If you are not in a major city, congratulations, you now live in one. Nobody predicted this change. Most teachers, professors, parents, and grandparents had no idea it was happening around them. We are returning to an earlier economic model where most people do not accumulate sufficient wealth to invest in land. That investment is reserved for a class of gentry who can absorb the high costs and significant risks. Others invest in movable assets instead. This is not better or worse, but very different from how the United States operated over the last century. Other parts of the world never embraced home ownership to the same degree and are transitioning away from it more quickly and comfortably. May you live in interesting times. Story 5. Be willing to move to areas where homes do not require generational wealth to purchase. Yes, prices have increased everywhere, but the insane ballooning of real estate is concentrated in certain regions. There are many places, especially in the Midwest, where housing remains quite attainable with even mediocre salaries to pay a mortgage. Story 6. I am a regretful homeowner. I bought a home in 2022 with the intention of setting the foundation to start a family with my girlfriend at the time. But I broke up with her and realized that I had put the cart before the horse. The location is in the suburbs, so it was ideal for starting a family, but my life called for me to be in the city. I left my home and rented it out. I found the right tenant, and it is now a cash-flowing asset, but it is still a mental burden. I got lucky, and I would much rather have access to the capital I put down. Buying a home made me realize how much a home purchase is an investment in your lifestyle. If you are buying it as a financial asset, then you are missing a lot of the picture. It is the largest purchase most people make in their lifetimes, and it carries a lot of hidden costs, both mental and financial. Most people see a home purchase as a final goal, but that is short-sighted. It is something you have to take care of, and as a financial instrument, there are better ones out there that require zero effort. Unless you know you love home improvements or you need large amounts of space and want no oversight in how you modify it, nobody needs to purchase a home. Renting is fine. For context, I now live and rent in an urban environment, and it serves me well. I am close to friends, culture, live shows, and many events, just the way I have always liked it. Story 7. I thought that I could not afford one but applied for a loan and was approved. It is not the house of my dreams but has been my home for 14 years. Story 8. You do not have to buy a $400,000 home. You do not need a new home, a newer home, a large mansion, or a golf course lawn on a small lot in a well-established and organized neighborhood. You do not need somewhere with a homeowners association. Get out of the city and the established suburbs. Look at fixer-uppers or small homes. Start small. Everyone thinks that a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom colonial or ranch is a mandatory minimum starter home. It is not. Story 9 depends on why. Make it a choice. You cannot afford your home if you want to live in London and work for minimum wage, but you can work in cheaper areas and own your own home. You should reconcile the choice, not blame a lack of opportunity where you are. For example, you chose to work somewhere or in a job that means you will not have your own home. Tell yourself, I want to live and work here because of specific reasons, so I must realize I will not own my home. Story 10. What do? Is working from home an option? If it is, you can look for something in a more rural area. Story 11. Home is where you live and where you are happy. It depends on what makes you happy. I am happier renting so I can move every few years without hassle. There are mobile homes, manufactured homes, and rural homes that are more affordable. There are also recreational vehicle homes if you enjoy traveling and living in new places frequently. Story 12. If your earning power is low, it's time to move to a rural area. You may still earn little, but the cost of living is lower. If you live in an expensive metropolitan area and cannot take advantage of economic opportunities, it is difficult to resolve this issue. Consider marrying well, perhaps. Story 13. You do not. I guarantee that somewhere out there is a home you could buy. You just do not live there. Story 14. The same way I accept that I will never play in the National Basketball Association, I shrug and move on with life. Although there is a lot that goes into buying a house, many factors are in your control, such as choosing to get a better job, seeking out a relationship to create a dual-income household, moving somewhere cheaper, or other options. Story 15. I like renting, to be honest. If something major breaks, I do not have to pay to fix it. I will get there eventually, but I am in no rush, and renting is good for now. Story 16. Not owning a home does not make you a bad person. It does not make you a failure. It is not your fault that you were born in this economy. Story 17. Brother, you are going to be alive for the next 20 years at least, unless you die unnaturally. You are going to own a home. It might not be soon, maybe even in a few years. However, if you think that the issues with the economy and the housing market, much of which are essentially aftereffects of coronavirus disease 2019, will last that long, then owning a home is the least of your concerns. At that point, you are probably better off moving to another country. Story 18. You're 28? I barely broke into my career at 25. I worked very hard and was making $20,000 a year. I was one of the lucky ones. I worked a passion job which started off financially terrible. I was volunteering for years and going to school but had to build my resume to start. Finally, I got my foot in the door and was slowly able to make progress with my salary year after year. We had some big financial hits a few years ago which drained savings, and the cost of living was always growing, so it felt like I wasn't making progress. Every time I got a 3% raise, my rent went up $200 a month year after year. I was finally able to dig my way out and purchased a house at 39. It might not seem possible in this moment, but if you set yourself up for a long-term goal, look for career growth, and be willing to move for careers and home ownership, you might surprise yourself. If this is something you want, start making goals. It won't happen overnight, but it's not guaranteed that you will make it. It's not like our parents' and grandparents' generation when home ownership at 22 was the norm. We have to strap in for the long term. Story 19. If you want a house, you can probably buy one. You might need to make some sacrifices in terms of size, style, or location. Story 20. I was priced out of my hometown, so we moved from New Jersey to Pennsylvania. My mortgage, including property tax, is $400 cheaper than the two-bedroom apartment we had in North Jersey. When you say you will never own a home, you may be right if you are limiting yourself to a specific area. However, if you are willing to relocate, you will find what you are looking for. Story 21. I feel this is really hard to answer without knowing why you will not own a home. Do you not make enough money? Do you not live in an area with affordable housing prices? Maybe you are living in the wrong country or city for your income or skill set. A friend of mine who is somewhat clueless works hard enough to own a house. Maybe you do not want it enough to work hard enough for it, but then you have to accept that it is by your own effort, not because of society or the government. Story 22. Be happy that you have a roof over your head in the first place. 3 members of my family no longer do, and they have the summer heat to deal with. Story 23. Owning a piece of real estate is not the right solution for everyone. Just like the misconception that a college education is required to be successful, I believe that for the majority of people, home ownership is not the best financial choice. While it builds equity, unless you have excess cash flow or the skills to maintain and improve the property, it becomes a significant liability. Additionally, it limits mobility options. For example, millions of people have very low mortgage payments saving hundreds each month, but they cannot move to new areas for jobs that could pay thousands more. There are many neighborhoods across America filled with families trapped in homes that are in disrepair because they cannot sell for enough to pay off their mortgage and move to better accommodations. Being house poor is not a good way to own real estate. Story 24. Sorry, brother. I traveled into the future and saw your future self in your new home eating pizza. Owning a home is inevitable. Story 25. I have owned 4 homes over my life, but now because interest rates are so high, it makes more sense to rent. Homeownership is nice if you know you want to live in the same place for at least 10 years, but it is no longer the pathway to wealth that it once was. Plus, you have all the headaches of owning, maintenance, repairs, homeowners association, and so on. Story 26. Might sound cheesy, but be grateful for what you do have instead of what you do not or will not have. I got my first apartment last year with my girlfriend, and while it might not be the Ritz-Carlton, it is not Skid Row. It is close to work and family. I also know it will not be forever here. That said, never say never. Save your money. In the worst-case scenario, you will have to find a house in another state. But it is still possible, especially if you are young. Story 27. I bought a house at age 24 with a child. I am currently 25. It is not impossible. It is difficult right now, but it is only getting better. You are thinking about it all backwards. I only have a warehouse job and did not go to college. Just do something. It is not very hard. Story 28. I just helped my son buy a perfectly fine 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom home for $85,000 in a livable Midwestern city with low crime and plenty of jobs. His mortgage, taxes, and home insurance cost $701 a month. Maybe you just need to move. Story 29. There are many alternatives for home buying, such as prefabricated and tiny houses, that are affordable. You can do it. Story 30. Do whatever makes the most sense financially for you. I can afford to buy the home I currently rent with all cash, but I won't because I don't believe in Bay Area real estate. Owning isn't always the answer, but it can be for most towns. It depends on your life situation and your local market conditions. Story 31. It's not impossible, family. There are many ways to buy a home. I used a Veterans Affairs loan to buy my house when I was 23, but I know people who do not qualify for one who just saved up and bought a house with no problem. It is not easy, but it is not impossible by any means. Story 32. My ex-fiancé told me I would end up living in my parents' basement. For years later, I purchased a home with my fiancé. Story 33. Not with that attitude, you won't. I totally understand where you are coming from. With time, saving, strategizing, and a little optimism, you will have a much better chance than if you give in to pessimism. Story 34. Get a job, don't build debt, save money, buy a house. I have a 22-year-old adopted son who came from nothing and bought his own house last year. He earned all of it on his own, working in a warehouse most of the time, making just above minimum wage. If you are a young adult complaining about not being able to buy a $500,000 house at the beginning of adulthood, then you still have some growing up to do. Too many people try to live in areas they cannot afford. If your best option is unskilled, low-pay work, then you probably should not try to live in a high-cost-of-living area. On other advice forums, it almost always comes down to the reason people cannot get a home is that they cannot make enough to buy a house they do not need in an area they cannot afford. People need to grow up and be willing to move. Story 35. That is most likely the result of the choices you make and the limitations you set for yourself. Otherwise, there is no way to know what will happen over the coming decades. People probably said the same thing back in 2007 before the subprime crisis occurred. It is failing again now, but globally, with bail-in rescue rather than bailout agreements. Many things that people think are set in stone will surprisingly change. In the next 2 to 3 years, there will be many changes that few saw coming unless they had reliable sources. Story 36. What has worked for me is living in a place where not being a homeowner is seen as unbecoming, like New York City. Homeownership is largely a keeping up with the Joneses exercise in my opinion, and there are other ways to build equity if that is the reason. So why not just change which Joneses you want to keep up with? Story 37. I know it sounds like vague advice, but you can own a home if you decide you want to own a home. I left college with a large amount of debt despite being on scholarship due to poor financial literacy and an unfortunate car accident while uninsured. Then I realized my degree was not as valuable as I thought it would be. So I taught myself a highly desired and highly paid skill over a year, 3 to 4 hours a day after work, worked hard to make the right contacts, took some lower pay and high workload positions at companies which would look good on my resume for a few years, and learned financial literacy. I was able to pay off all my debt surprisingly fast. Now I am in the process of buying my first house, have great savings, and do not stress about money. I am 29. You should never allow yourself to feel like you are doomed to something you are unhappy with. If you're not making enough, look into other fields. If you are not managing your money, learn to do it better. Story 38. If you smoke a joint, have a glass of wine, go to temple, or engage in any other activity that makes you feel like you are in your own personal happy space, just relax there for a bit and enjoy the moment. That felt great, didn't it? Now get up, dry your tears, and make yourself look presentable. Take a deep breath, accept that this is how it is, and understand that the universe can be cruel and unjust. Life isn't fair, but you weren't even prepared, were you? On some level, we are the architects of our misfortunes. Forget that imaginary house and focus on completing the tasks available to you. Do or do not. There is no try. Life has never been fair, so certain actions are necessary to counteract this disadvantage. Dedicate yourself to education, work hard, take personal responsibility, live a healthy lifestyle, and share these values whenever possible. Every action that supports your dreams and ambitions contributes positively. Every choice going against these goals detracts from your progress. The higher the ratio of positive to negative actions, the better your chances of achieving your desired outcome. It is ultimately a matter of chance. Accept this and move on. Work hard so that future generations may have a better life than we did. There is zero control over fate, and perhaps your destiny was decided generations ago because of circumstances beyond your control. Life can be harsh. Be prepared. Alternatively, avoid being pretentious like many of us were, and either burn it all down or join those who sing regretfully when faced with harsh realities. Story 39. First, take a moment to appreciate that you were born into one of the wealthiest countries in the world, in one of the most advantageous times. You have basically unlimited access to clean, temperature-controlled water, delicious food, a temperature-controlled home, comfort, safety, and endless entertainment. Please really let that sink in. The majority of people in the world are lucky to have access to even one of those things consistently. It frustrates me how much people in wealthy countries underestimate how luxurious and comfortable their lives are compared to most of human history. So really think about it. Why is home ownership so important to you? Would it actually increase your quality of life? Or are you just obsessed with checking another thing off the life script you were given at birth? Is this something that truly matters to you? Or is it just something people tell you to care about? I know a handful of people who have put themselves in debt or lowered their quality of life purely because they were obsessed with home ownership. Like, congratulations, you have a home. That's awesome. But now you can't afford to go out or do any hobbies because you are trapped. My friends bought a one-bedroom condominium together, which is fantastic. One friend was adamant about not wanting to pay someone else's mortgage. But guess what? They pay almost 3 times the amount I pay monthly for my apartment, and their place is almost the same size. I might be paying for someone else's mortgage, but I am not paying the astronomical condominium fees, taxes, and home repairs that they have to cover. Story 40. By not being broke, of course. This is coming from a guy who owns 0 homes and is nowhere near having a deposit for one. Story 41. With the first-time homebuyers programs, I do not see why you would not be able to qualify if you have a steady income. Story 42. I have had the same job for 25 years. I make $34.50 an hour in a union job. I also have a small side union job running a local union. I make $90,000 a year. We will never own a home. We are a one-income household. My wife is a stay-at-home mom to our 11-year-old autistic daughter. We have been completely priced out of 5 counties where I live. There is no chance. Well, there is. I would have to sell a kidney, my bladder, and a left arm. We have been in the market for the past 4 years. The way the market has changed and adjusted has completely shut my family out of everything. I would have to uproot everything I have and adore, move 5 states away, and start from scratch at 50 years old. Now, story 43. Most people will never truly own their home. They will just pay a mortgage until they move into a new home with a new mortgage. The goal is to hopefully recover some of your decades of mortgage payments by making a small profit on your selling price. Then you do not feel so bad about essentially renting for the last decade, even though, unlike a rental, you had to pay for every expense and, in reality, did not gain anything. The greatest scam of all time is home ownership. The only people who make money from a house are the flippers, who can buy and sell within about 6 months. In summary, do not feel bad. You are not missing out. Story 44. How much do you make and how much student loan debt do you have? Instead of seeking reinforcement of your negativity, analyze the numbers if you really want help. Story 45. Never homeowners is on the rise, from 31% in other generations to 40% in millennials and Generation Z, with a 6-year average delay. It is not that odd to be a forever renter. There have always been forever renters. They make up a larger percentage of people now. I had to move far outside the city and buy a much smaller home than my parents had. Go for big windows and search within your price range. Expand your search based on price as needed. There are $30,000 cottage homes that could be renovated for 4 seasons with less than $10,000. There are opportunities, but they come with costs and drawbacks. I found mine during COVID at $165,000. It is a less than ideal area and needed some work. Last I checked, there were 4 listings under $200,000 in my town within 45 minutes from a major city, with traffic up to 1.5 hours. My neighbors, 4 to 5 of them, get up and leave for work before 6 a.m. on a street with fewer than 10 homes. It is doable, but there are other hits to lifestyle. Buying a car and a house in the same month nearly broke me. My old roommate asked me why I did not have more savings. What a jerk. Story 46. Embrace the relative freedom of renting. Move around, build up your savings instead of spending on home improvements, and live in places you would never consider, including foreign countries. I used to own a home but have been renting for 18 years and love it. Story 47. Start working through a plan for the life you will have without owning a home. The more you work through the details, the easier acceptance becomes. Story 48. Find a decent job in a smaller town. Jobs in the Midwest do not really pay much less, but the cost of living is a fraction of what you have to pay in the city, so your dollar goes a lot further. Homeownership is very doable on a $50,000 to $60,000 salary if you are in a smaller town. Story 49. You tell yourself you are being genuinely stupid. I bought my house at 22 after 3.5 years of working at my current job. One thing that needs to stop is this persistent idea that housing should always be cheap and that market forces do not exist. Also, the belief that if I do not own the country by age 21, I will never own anything is misguided. Story 50. I live in one of the countries with the lowest home ownership rates in the world. Paradoxically, it is also a very wealthy country and we live comfortably, able to save significant amounts of money. I have rationalized it this way. The dream of home ownership is dead and has been for a decade or two. Only a generation of older adults own houses, and after them, only corporations can afford the land. They will build large apartments and high-rises because we are running out of land. The single-family home is on its way out. Story 51. I own a home from inheritance. Sometimes it is not a big deal, but it is not easy either. It is like renting an apartment with extra steps and advanced responsibilities. By owning a home, one should know that they will spend lots of money on roof repairs, maintenance, and other things. I might be a different kind of person, but sometimes I wish I owned a medium-sized apartment. The important thing is to have some kind of roof over your head. At least you are not homeless. Story 52. I look at it this way. I do not want to have to mow a lawn, replace laundry machines, dishwasher, central air unit, or do any maintenance. If something breaks, I just have to log into a portal and submit a ticket. Typically gets fixed within 24 hours. That being said, it would be nice to put this money into something that might earn a profit in the future or have something to leave for my children if I ever have any. Either way, I am just relaxing in my affordable 2-bedroom unit with my dog for now. Story 53. Just don't give up, buddy. I haven't, and I'm almost 50. I have investments, 2 kids, a wife, and no debt. The investments are starting to pick up. It just takes a while. You do not know where your life is going to be headed, and you don't know what opportunities and risks you will need to take. Keep your head up. Look for what might work and go full bore at it. But you simply cannot give up no matter how much it hurts. Story 54. You do not. You get up and work to make it happen instead of wallowing in self-pity. In 2010, I bought a $6,000 house and fixed it up slowly while I lived there. In 2014, I bought 30 acres. In 2020, I sold my house. In 2021, I bought a 1989 double-wide and put it on the 30 acres. In 2025, I still live in the double-wide. I have 3 barns, 4 tractors, and 20 cattle. I am doing custom hay cutting and agricultural services as a side gig. Do you want to know what I do not have? A television. Why would I waste time watching television when I could be doing something productive that helps me accomplish my goals? While you were partying on Saturday night, I was baling hay until 10 p.m. On Memorial Day, I moved 80 bales out of the field. What did you do? Story 55. There are many things that will never happen realistically, but owning a home is still fairly realistic for most adults. Here in southern New Mexico, I was able to mortgage a $140,000 house, 1,500 square foot, 5-bedroom, middle of town, for $550 out of pocket 7 years ago. Of course, that was just before the big housing bubble, but it is still possible to do something similar in areas with affordable housing. In my case, I took advantage of the State Mortgage Finance Authority first-time homebuyer program that pays the down payment for you. I am still living in the home and quite happy with it. Story 56. First, that is not necessarily a fact. The reality is that there are still many options to own a home. Here are a couple of examples of paths to home ownership. If you serve honorably in the United States military, reserves, or National Guard, you have VA home loans available to you, which are low or sometimes even no interest rate loans. Combine this with the GI Bill for free to nearly free college, and you are in a good position to have a job that can afford to buy a home along with financing options already arranged. The GI Bill also works for trade schools and many certifications. I am not a recruiter, but I am a veteran. While there are costs to this path that many will point out, there are benefits too. Additionally, many areas of the country and the world still offer very low-cost housing if you are an American. The issue is often whether you see this part of the country or world as desirable to live in. It might be worth deciding if your priority is to live in a specific place or to have a home of your own. If owning a home is your priority, it might be worth exploring a change of location. Story 57. Where I live, a takeaway coffee is $6. Just stop, buy a tin of instant coffee and drink it at home. Look at all your subscriptions. You probably do not need any of them. Maybe you do not really want a home? Story 58. Assuming you live in a developed country, the only thing stopping you from owning a home is yourself. Save money and move to a city or even a new country where average house prices are about 10% of the price where you are now, and buy there. Story 59. If home ownership is truly your dream, then find a way to make it happen. With the advent of remote work and high-speed satellite internet, there is very little preventing you from moving to a remote location where you can own property and build a house at a low cost. Story 60. Another idea. Be thankful you are not responsible for constant upkeep, paying taxes, fixing roofs, and so on. Postscript. Downvote me all you want, but owning a home makes you indebted to someone else for life. Story 61. Invest in a technology exchange-traded fund and be smart when your money grows twice as fast as it would have if trapped in real estate. Story 62. The sect of family is full of lies and manipulations, and as we know, it is all in the family. Are you silently going to accept their judgment on you, even though they are wrong? Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.